We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Go on without me. Just go.
A good soldier never leaves a man behind.
Because I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness.
Life, finds a way.
Welcome to Silver Screen Biases. Each week we pick a movie off of IMDb's Top 250 and dig into it. We're examining truth claims in critically acclaimed movies while also examining our own biases. I'm Nelson.
This is Jeff.
And this week we're joined by Phil. Are we using your last name, Phil?
I don't care. You can.
Phil Haydn.
Hayden.
What's up,
Verified.
guys?
Blue
Hayden
check mark.
Financial.
That's
Hayden
so
and Hayden and
incorrect
Sons.
and so false.
Hayden, and Hayden Financials.
LLC.
Hayden Aircraft Freight Systems.
And what movie we're talking about this week, Jeff?
1995's 3-hour cinematic experience, Braveheart.
War epic.
Yes.
All right. But before we get into the movie,
Yeah.
let's get to know our guest,
Yes.
Phil.
What's up, guys?
Hey, man. So do you want the questions first or last? Tell us about yourself, or do you want me to drill you first with questions and then you kind of tell the audience
Drill,
who you
baby,
are?
drill.
Well, currently I'm wearing a Cavs shirt
Mm.
and
Describe yourself cinematically.
I have long flowing hair. It's kind of in the shape of a
It's
mullet
true.
now.
He's a personal stylist.
I don't know. Questions about me? I guess I've spent most of my life in working in the church world.
Mhm.
Probably, I'd say 18 to 20 years. Just doing different things like that. Mainly worship leading, doing stuff, all sorts of ministry related opportunities.
Right.
More recently, I found myself in the freelance world, and so I'm doing graphic design, video production, all hosts of random things, a lot of entrepreneur stuff, business-related things. I've been working with a lot of businesses, and more recently, I've been doing some consulting work. So that's been fun.
For financial stuff, right?
Yeah, for financial stuff, because I'm so good at financials.
When he's not defending people in court.
or fighting air fighting
That's
things.
air freighting freight.
I don't know how that industry works.
Frightening air freight, yeah. All right, so as listeners know, we got 3 questions for you here, Phil, just to kind of round out who is Phil Haydn. So what's your political bias? How would you describe yourself when it comes to politics or governmental things?
That's funny because I remember my 8th grade teacher asking me that question when I was in 8th grade.
8th grade?
Yeah.
Phew.
And
You shouldn't have a political identity in the 8th grade.
well, that's what I didn't know what I was. And I said, because he was like, do you lean this way or lean this way? And he described both of the sides or whatever. And I said to him, I'm like, well, I think I lean that way. And he's like, no, you don't.
Oh, no, you don't.
I was like, oh, I
Not
don't.
if I can help it.
Because as he was describing things, I remember him saying well, this side really has care for people and they do a lot of help towards humanity things or whatever.
Republicans.
And and then he's like, this side cares about business and entrepreneurship and things like that.
That's
The
also
Green
Republican.
Party.
I'm confused now.
It's all good. But that's the way he was describing it to me. And I'm like, well, the one side kind of sounds like Jesus, but the other side sounds mean and greedy. So I told him I was that.
So
And
he was a Democrat.
and he was like, yeah. He was like, no, you're not. You're this one. And I'm like, oh, okay, I am. And then I went home and asked my mom and dad. I'm like, am I this? And they're like, yes, you're that. So
Did he know your parents?
no. He just knew because of the fact that I was raised in a church and evangelical church that
Right.
I lean this way. So from that age to about I don't know, till I would say college, I identified as a Republican and
Right.
was like, that's what I'm supposed to vote for. That's how I'm supposed to believe, things like that. It wasn't until I got into college that I started leaning probably more towards a libertarian kind of view.
Started to experiment politically?
Yeah, it's dangerous. Dipping my toe in the water there. Drinking the forbidden fruit. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Because it's
The forbidden
Now
fruit
I'm
of free market
liquid
capitalism.
Did you stick?
yeah. So that's and I would say I probably still lean more in that moderate area right now, politically.
Yeah. It's weird because whether you're left wing or right wing, chances are you don't really identify well with the party base and the party line.
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my left wing and right wing friends, when they hear libertarian ideas, they're like, you know what, that's really more similar to what I believe, and it's pretty consistent with like American mythology of what our founding fathers believed and that kind of stuff. And so it's funny to me that the two parties so poorly represent the people that live here, and yet entirely represent 95% of the country, right? Like it just doesn't make sense, of the voting country.
Yeah, it's that two-party system. I love it.
Just like the founding fathers wanted.
Yes, all four of them. The ones that are in stone in Mount Rushmore. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All because they were all founding fathers.
And on the money.
On the money. Yeah, because Benjamin Franklin was also
Yeah.
a president. Yeah.
And you
We are not a
Ulysses
history podcast.
Not a history podcast.
This has everything to do with the movie
Right.
now that we're going to be talking about.
Absolutely.
Because you'll see that George Washington's going to show up later.
He does.
Crossing
George
Delaware
William Wallace Washington.
on Christmas Eve.
Yes.
Cherry wooden teeth, cutting down cherry trees, the whole deal.
Mm-hmm.
Apocryphal, I'm told. All right, and
Phil, how would you describe yourself religiously? What is your religious bias?
Oh, man.
There is a wrong answer to this. So
There is.
yes.
yeah,
I'm
and we'll,
pushing
we'll
back.
let you know if you find it.
Right.
Okay. That'd be a good one. Just stop the whole thing.
No, that's
Wrong.
not what you believe.
We're done. Hey, guys, see you next week. Like, that's it. I would have to say the simplest way to put it would be a Christian viewpoint, but that's so broad and painted with so many different strokes. You can go to evangelicalism or Protestantism, kind of that kind of viewpoint would be what I've most identified with for most of my life. I would say more recently I've found a lot of freedom in more higher liturgies. So a little bit more of like, I don't want to say Catholicism because that's not necessarily what I'm going toward, but for the
Lutheran.
liturgy side of things or whatever.
A lot of Protestant denominations have liturgical traditions.
Mm-hmm. So that would be kind of where I'm sitting religiously right now. Yeah. I hope that
Cool.
answers.
Yeah, that's good.
Simple.
Now, I know the
without-
worship leader at your church, and he doesn't strike me as a liturgy guy.
Oh no.
Okay. All right.
Have you seen any good liturgy churches around this area?
Not really.
Yeah.
It's not a tradition that's endorsed around here, really.
I haven't been to too many churches in a while outside of
Your home church?
yeah.
I think I
been a
did
minute.
a very long stint there of church hopping for over a year and
Yeah.
visited quite a few different churches, and
Are
It's-
there many Lutheran churches in the area?
not really.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even say I'd want to necessarily go to
Sure.
a Lutheran church. I just think for me personally, I'm finding value in the liturgies that are
Yeah.
bringing me closer to God.
Yeah.
I appreciate
That
that,
ritual
yeah.
kind of aspect of things. So,
There's something really beautiful about liturgy, which is that every liturgical tradition is focusing on these same themes at the same time
Yeah.
through the calendar year. And I've heard it described as like the heartbeat of the church. And I really like that because like it gives, not to use the Roman Catholic term for Catholic, but church universal. It kind of gives this feeling of like everybody's focusing on the same thing that I think sometimes we lose out on in more modern Protestant traditions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They both have their benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are times I grew up Baptist or in a
As did
Baptist
I.
church. There are times like not necessarily liturgy, but just there are times where I really miss
good old hymn
structure.
sing or something.
Well, not even just the content, but just the way things are structured and the way things are organized and just I don't know, there is like there's been freedom in having just this freedom of expression and this freedom of like this just open style type of worship and stuff where like you can modify it, you can change it, you can adapt, like it can be
You
molded.
have to have
But
a
there-
base in
yeah.
order to grow off of.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of Protestant churches and evangelical churches utilize their base as a moving target.
Yeah.
And so like every week it's something new. Like how can we make that base bigger and better and then build off of that?
Right.
And so with your evangelical church, or sorry, your more liturgical side churches, it's like, here's your base. Now, if you want to get crazy, like this is where the standard is, you're going to have to build off of that.
Want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
Yeah, and there's strengths and weaknesses to both sides.
Right.
Because there is a staleness that can creep in with that.
Yeah.
But also it's good to have foundations.
Yeah.
And on the other side, without foundations, you can get way off base real quick.
Right.
But it stays fresh. So, and there's more strengths and weaknesses to both sides than that. But like that's the big stark contrast right away.
Yeah. Awesome. Any more on that topic?
I'm good.
Cool.
We don't need to dive into that.
Last
That's not what we're
question. Last question. What's your favorite movies genre? How would you describe yourself when it comes to the cinema?
Media consumption.
Yes.
Man, I am like, give me like the dystopian kind of post-apocalyptic sci-fi
Which is why you picked
thrillers.
Braveheart.
Exactly. Yeah, it's yeah, that would be my bread and butter. Like, and I would even say more so recently. There's been so many more shows that have kind of popped up around that instead of like movies.
Yeah.
I think back in the day there was like you had your Slim Pickens, you got like The Matrix, and that's like all right, that's about as far as that goes.
Blade Runner.
Yeah. And there were some really cool ones, but like
would Mad Max be in that category?
Yeah, Mad Max be in that.
I haven't seen those.
There was a cool one called Equilibrium. I don't know if you ever saw that. Like that one was like, oh, this is awesome.
That's Denzel Washington, right?
No, it was the
I think of the
Bean guy.
I think of the Equalizer.
What's his name?
Ethan Hawke, isn't it?
Yes. No. Yeah. No, that was it Ethan? It was. Dude, that guy is so good.
Yeah.
Did
you see him in Boy?
Yeah.
Boyhood?
Yeah.
That's a great movie. Every year they filmed another scene so that over the course of like, was it like 10 to 15 years, you actually watch the actor grow up.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's wild.
That's fascinating.
You have to watch it now. Talk about it.
Boy.
With that genre of film, though, there's a lot of nihilism and cynicism.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that is like...
you're like loading me up for this. I love it.
Do you think that the reason that you enjoy that is that you tend towards nihilism and cynicism?
No.
Or is it because it's like having a slice of pie you've not been eating anything?
This is why I love it. And I would say that Walking Dead is a prime example of this. When you enter in these post-apocalyptic situations, you are now faced with an area where you have to figure out morality again, because everything, the game has changed. And so like you see these characters now struggle with the idea of like, what is morally right? What can I get away with? What in this new way of society and thinking is going to be what we're founded on and what is truth? And for me, I'm like, it's so interesting watching those characters develop that throughout movies, develop that throughout, well, in this case, TV shows. I mean, Walking Dead's a great example because now you're in like this zombie world and like, what is right? Like you're killing things all the time. And like, now how do you treat another human?
Yeah. You're watching, I'm also a Walking Dead fan. Like, and you're watching someone who through seasons, you're like, okay, this is the hero. This is the way to do it. And next thing you know, like the hero's doing the same thing as the person that they defeated couple seasons ago, but now they're justifying it the same way that person was. Like,
it's finding a true north again in those societies, and kind of watching it how like a lot of it kind of boils back down to almost like that messianic savior type of thing. Like even if you go to like I don't know if Game of Thrones would be considered like a dystopian kind of whatever sci-fi. It's kind of sci-fi.
Historical.
It's sci-fi, if you will. But like they eventually
more political thriller with dragons thrown in. The reason I started giggling there, you had said the rules have changed. I was out walking the other day, and somebody had a great big flag hanging off their porch. It says, Trump 2024, the rules have changed. And I took a picture, and I couldn't help but laugh because, like, I mean, nothing's changed, right? Like, for as long as I've been...
he's still my president.
We're going to make America good again.
Good.
For as long as I've been paying attention to politics, which is a pretty long while, the game's always been fixed. The loser always complains that it was unfair.
Yep.
And everybody kind of knows it's not fair, and that's part of the game. Everybody cheats, and whoever cheats the best wins.
And you move on.
And no, they don't. Jeff, we've been over this.
I'm trying to speak it into existence.
Yeah, I mean, Hillary Clinton complained just as much about election interference as Donald Trump did. It's just that one of them had the corporate media on their side, the other one didn't. I'll let you guys piece together who I think the corporate media was backing. But he did lose. He lost fair and square in that he didn't cheat as good as the other guy. Going back to what you were saying about the game has changed and you got to find north again. One thing that I find really interesting in these post-apocalyptic or dystopian worlds is the way they kind of expose the fact that deep within us, we all have this belief in objective truth, even when we don't want to acknowledge it. We want truth to be shades of gray. We want truth to be subjective. We want it to be your truth. But we see these apocalyptic scenarios, and we're like, no, that's wrong. He shouldn't have done that. Like, based on what criteria, right? By what standard? And I think it's really interesting that these, that the way that zombies expose the fact that we think that X behavior is unacceptable as a society, both within a zombie world and without one.
Awesome.
So you have it.
I'm satisfied.
Yeah.
I'm satisfied.
Is that a wrap, guys? We good?
Yeah, it's a great
That's
episode.
cool.
Thanks for coming
Thank
out.
you. Braveheart. Yep.
Braveheart.
Braveheart. Braveheart.
You got to be careful with those.
All right. Let me get some stats on the
Just
movie,
poop
and then
yourself.
we can get into our initial thoughts and dive a little deeper. So, 1995.
Wait, can you do it in like a radio voice? The year
I
was
don't-
1995.
I can do it in a podcast voice.
That'll be a nice
I don't know
start.
if I have a radio.
That'll be a nice change of pace.
Ooh.
Just lean into the mic a little bit and talk a little bit deeper.
In a world.
In a world.
Oh, critics. 1995. Directed by Mel Gibson.
Hey, he's in this, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He plays Rusty Wallace, the NASCAR driver. This is 2 hours and 57 minutes long. It is rated R. On IMDb.
Not in most Christian circles.
Right.
There's no language in this, was there?
Yeah. There was one F word, and the one
Was
guy
there?
said, "Watch your mouth."
Mm.
When the
I mean, there's plenty
when the
of-
There's a
crazy
lot
wo-
of beheadings.
when the one that was
There's
when
a
the
topless woman, there's male
Yeah.
genitalia,
when the
there's
disturbed
beheadings.
man came in to the camp, who
Regular
snuck the
Sunday.
knife into his arm, he snuck the knife in.
Yeah.
He said the F word.
No, he did.
Yeah.
I don't even remember.
The
He said
Irishman.
Yeah.
He
Oh,
does.
he
That's
did.
right.
Yeah.
That's
Right
right.
after invoking
It's because
God.
he's Irish. That's
Right
why
after
you don't even
invoking
think about
God,
it.
He
Yeah.
says the F word. That's
Yeah,
right.
I believe that's the only F. I think the B word's in there
There's no way of knowing.
as
I
well
like
too.
that you guys are saying the B and the F word.
Well, you
Well,
can
is
say
we-
fucking, but then we have to quack it out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering
You'll
what
get
that,
quacked.
like,
Yeah, I have to edit
what
it
the
all out
rules
in
were on
post.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got to edit that now. Good job. Anyhow, back to your synopsis of the movie in
Yeah.
1995.
1995. On IMDb, it got 8.3 out of 10 ratings from IMDb users. It is 75% on the tomato meter and 85% on the audience. And it currently is, wait for dramatic effect,
I'm waiting. I'm on the edge of my seat.
76 on the current IMDb top 250 as we are recording this episode. It sits at 76.
Did you take a look at its historic?
I did not.
I'll pull that up. Go ahead.
All right. And you'll get the budget here in a sec here, Nelson. I got one other thing for you. This movie's won some awards.
Mhm.
In 1996, it won Best Picture, which is an Oscar for Best Picture. It won an Oscar for Best Director. It was nominated for an Oscar for Best Writing, Screenplay, and written directly for the screen. And then it was the winner of Oscar for Best Cinematography. So it's an award-winning film. Yeah, and then Nelson, you got the budget and the history on the IMDb too.
Yeah, history first. So, 1996, when IMDb is launched, it debuts at 14th.
Okay.
It went up to 13th, and it's always been on the IMDb top 250. It has never left the top 250. The lowest it's ever gotten was 105. It cost $72 million to make in 1995.
Okay.
And there's been 99% inflation in those
Nice.
less than 30 years. So to make that movie today is $143 million hairs.
It's a lot of doll hairs.
It's a lot of doll hairs. And also, there's a moment in the scene where Robert the Bruce says something about a patriot, and the camera cuts to Mel Gibson, and he like looks right into the camera almost. It's like, did that movie come out before this? And I looked up, it comes out 5 years
2000s,
later.
5 years later.
later.
Yeah.
So it's like
It's prophetic.
It's like
Also, as side note, as I was kind of doing some research on this, I didn't do a lot of research, but I found out
Spoiler alert.
that yeah,
God.
at least you watched the right movie.
I watched the right
We've
movie.
had worse.
We're in the same. Mel Gibson was trying to get, I think it was Warner Brothers to fund this movie, and he couldn't get it. But they wanted him to sign on for another Lethal Weapon movie.
Oh yeah,
And so they said, like, if you sign on for another Lethal Weapon movie, then we'll fund it. And he was like, I don't want to do it.
right.
So I was like, okay, that's cool. So we went out and found the money elsewhere. So we didn't have to do another Lethal Weapon.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
However,
he'd
there is
already wrapped the Mad Max trilogy at this point and the Lethal Weapon trilogy.
There is a new Lethal Weapon in the works, though. So,
I know. That's good.
Yeah. So that's way to stay true, Mel Gibson. He's
Compromise-
also working on a sequel to The Passion of the Christ, which Spoiler
Is it going to be like the
It's
Family Guy one?
Resurrection of the
The
Christ.
resurrection, yeah.
Are you guys
So-
familiar with the Family Guy joke about that?
I'm not.
It's Passion of the Christ Part 2, and it's Jesus and Chris Tucker.
Yes.
I don't know why, but it's always like crack me up. So when he started talking about how he's going to make a sequel to it, I was like, that's not going to work.
fantastic.
Never seen the Passion of the Christ.
You haven't?
No.
I've seen it once.
I saw it once. That
Jim
was good.
Caviezel
Caviezel.
and his abs are
Yeah,
in that.
I saw it in theaters with a church youth group.
I did too.
And
I had the same experience.
I think it's interesting that an actor portraying Jesus on the cross is struck by lightning repeatedly and doesn't get the hint.
Oh, he's got like some cult following now too, doesn't he?
That checks out.
I'm
That
not.
makes
I'm not
sense.
kidding. I remember him being in the news.
Wait, when you say cult following, do you mean that euphemistically, or does he actually have a cult?
No, he actually is like a part of a cult or something.
Oh.
We should look that up or something.
Yeah,
somewhere
we got
along-
time.
You know, Jim
How do you spell Caviezel?
Cult. I don't know. Just let Google fix it for you.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, this whole podcast is AI. So,
Yeah, we do lean on ChatGPT a lot.
yeah, because our writers are all on strike.
Oh yeah.
So,
So when I search Jim Caviezel cult, the two things I have is from the Daily Beast, which is a left wing,
Yeah.
very left wing, how Hollywood's quote unquote Jesus Jim Caviezel went full QAnon.
That's what it was. It was the QAnon stuff.
And then
that he
Vanity
was into.
Fair, Jim Caviezel decries, quote, the adrenochroming of children. I would not say QAnon, as somebody, and I don't think we've ever talked about this on the show.
we haven't. And I'm actually very
Oh, gosh.
unfamiliar with the QAnon stuff.
Well,
I
no,
don't-
no.
No, we just
We've,
straight up.
we've never talked about that on the show, but this other thing.
What's the other thing?
As somebody that was basically in a cult, QAnon's not a cult, but it is heavy conspiracy theory stuff.
That's yeah.
Um,
See, I knew I was in the
absurd.
right kind of area
Yeah.
with him. I was like, he did something weird.
yeah, you're
what it was.
close enough for a drone strike.
Oh my gosh. Ah, you goofs.
All right, and then I got two more kind of production things. Young
Hello.
William Wallace was played by James Robinson, who you know from nothing else. He's really done nothing
From
else.
Meet the Robinsons.
He's done nothing else of note. And then we're going to get this out of the way early. Greg Kimball did visual effects for this project and also for A Clockwork Orange.
Okay, there's our connection.
All right, got that out of the way.
Yes.
Let's get into
Well,
Braveheart.
yeah, so
Braveheart.
yeah, have either of you guys seen this movie before recently? Was any of this like a first time viewing for you guys? What's your initial take on the movie, and where does it sit with you as we sit here?
It's
with
got
it?
to have been at least a decade.
First, let's talk about like when did you see the movie first?
Oh, I
Oh.
like that.
I remember. It was at Ben's house after a long day of riding bikes. We were 13. We were watching it late at night, and that
about the
secret wedding scene really caught my attention as a
Oh, yes.
13-year-old boy. And then the Battle of Sterling, I also thought was hilarious because butts and
The
genitals,
butts,
hilarious. What's not to love? So that's when I first saw it. I was 12 or 13 years old.
I'd be about the same, 12 or 13. I think it was actually like one of the first movies I asked my dad if I could actually watch, and he was like, "Oh yeah, like that one's fine."
And then he's watching it with him, and he's like, ooh.
I don't know if he watched it with me or not, but
I think like a TV edit of this probably isn't going to cut out much.
Yeah,
But it is like, and I know this is late show
You're
discussion point.
You're good.
It is very much a rated R film.
Yeah.
But if you edit out the brief nudity and the one
some beheadings
and the one F
Some-
word,
Yeah, and,
honestly, all the violence.
The F word can stay because you can have up to three in a PG-13.
No, I'm just talking about like if I'm showing it to a 13. I guess yeah.
Gotcha.
yeah.
I'm saying like
So,
the legally you can have three.
All
in
the
a
violence,
PG-13.
I think a 13-year-old boy can handle just fine.
Mhm.
But just because of the nature of 13-year-old boys, I
Now,
think you should cut some of that nudity.
Now, I will say, and I know we're jumping ahead, but like, let me answer my own question. first.
when did you watch it?
I don't remember. So leading up to watching it again for this episode, I thought that I was familiar with it, and I know I had seen up into the big battle with you. Take our lives, but never take. Like I knew that. I
Battle
knew the
of
premise
Stirling.
of the movie. I knew why he
Your
went and got
Scottish accent
why he
is
went
on
thank
point.
you.
You'll never take our lives.
Punjabi William Wallace.
I love it.
There's the sequel.
Gandhi Part 2.
Oh gosh. But I assumed that I knew the whole story. Like, so I don't know if I ever finished it. So whenever I did watch the parts that I did when I was younger, I don't remember how this movie ended. So after I knew that big battle with the big battle cry and stuff, I knew that wasn't the end. But going beyond that, I'm like, I don't know what's next. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember when I watched it last. It's been a while. It's been since before I've been married. So it's been at least 11 years. But I would say the violence is manageable up until the torture scene at the end. That was the one part where I'm like, this isn't just like war violence. This is like, that one hit me more than anything else, was that torture at the end when William Wallace is being strung up. Like, that was hard to watch. So like, I think that would also be cut from this TV editing.
Yeah.
So I guess my question would then be, with knowing that all of us haven't seen it in forever, like it's a long time. I went into this kind of with like a fresh set of eyes, a fresh set of older eyes, I guess now this time around. And I was like asking myself the question, does this hold up? I literally asked myself that question the whole movie. And I'd be interested to know. I like to paint general broad strokes.
The episode with that question?
I like to know.
You're getting ahead of yourself.
I'm sorry.
But no, we could talk about it.
Because like I like to point in general broad strokes and then bring it down to like more minute details.
I loved it. I was vibing with this movie the whole time. Like I was like, first of all, I forgot how good the soundtrack was.
Soundtrack is
James Horner.
It's amazing.
We've talked about him before. He did Titanic. He did. There's another one that we've talked about that he does really well. Like another one that's on the list. Hold on.
The music alone, it doesn't matter what freaking Braveheart says when he comes up to the battle. It could have been anything. He'd be like, "Sons of Scotland, show me your." And I'd be like, "Oh, this is so amazing." I'm like gonna cry right now because it was so like that is so well done for a score.
Yeah. So my week and more specifically my day-to-day got hijacked. And so I wasn't able to fit it into my schedule like I hoped. And so I watched this on 2x speed.
Okay.
And I got to say, the movie loses a lot of its potency.
Yeah,
that's
the soundtrack's a little off. Yeah. Now, if you listen to this podcast at 2 speed, then Nelson just did the song in 4 speed. So
so it's... So one thing I noticed is, as you said, the speech, I don't care what he's saying because the music, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I did the speech at 2x speed, and I'm basically just reading the subtitles to keep up. Mm-hmm. And it's a relatively good speech, I think. And I actually have it here in my notes. But, like, when I read it, I was like, this wouldn't have been enough to change the minds of these men.
Oh, yeah, that's what I thought, too. But, the original was supposed to be, like, 4 hours long, and they had to cut it back. So I'm sure there was probably more. Maybe
a half hour of that was the secret wedding.
Do any of you guys know, like, are any of you guys up on, like, the actual historical?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So was there, like, did William Wallace do a big speech before that battle? Like, is there documentation?
It's not documented.
That's not known.
No.
Okay. I just didn't know, like
he's just known to be a great, like, war hero.
Yeah. Some of the big historical inaccuracies, the film kind of compresses really like a couple decades of events into what seems like maybe 6 months to a year.
Okay.
William Wallace was not lowborn. He was a noble. Mm-hmm. He was one of several nobles. In fact, not just the one. In fact, in the Battle of what's the name of the city? In the Battle of Falkirk, when he gets betrayed by other nobles, one of the nobles that turns and leaves, actually we have documented, we know was there and buddy? Stayed. Yeah. Princess Isabella from France would have been a child
and never actually,
and they probably never met. And the Battle of Stirling, which is the first one, where they show their butts.
Yeah.
In the Battle of Stirling, there was the Battle of Stirling Bridge is the full name of that, and the bridge was a major tactical point. And then the Battle of Falkirk was fought in a marsh. There was also a bridge in that one that was a major strategic point.
Leaving out all these bridges.
They love bridges up in Scotland.
I've got a production note on the bridge.
This was the abridged version.
The extra hour was bridges.
Oh my goodness!
The extra hour was secret weddings and bridges.
It was just Wes Anderson shots of bridges. Is what it was. Yeah, the Wes Anderson cut of this movie. So. This is from IMDb. When asked by a local why the Battle of Stirling Bridge was filmed on an open plain, Gibson answered, "The bridge got in the way." The local answered, that was the English. That's what the English found. So
That's good.
yeah,
But it would have, like, I don't think it would have made for such a cinematic, awesome battle
right.
scene. Like, that is one of, like, I do remember looking back on that and rewatching it now. I was like, this is just epic.
Yeah.
Like, there's
Yeah.
just so much stuff happening.
The
right
raising
now.
of the spears in the
Yeah, it
ground,
was-
like
Mhm.
that.
If
It was.
if
that
this
was
had been like a
incredible.
series instead of a movie, and they didn't do it as a bridge, I think that's a bigger fault
Mhm.
because you have the time. Earlier, when you were giving your answer on did you enjoy it, I was snickering over here, and Phil caught my eye, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta stop looking at him
You
like
guys are
that."
making eyes.
What I was looking at was I know that there's a lot of continuity mistakes in this movie, but I don't know them off the
Oh,
top
is
of my
there
head,
really?
so I pulled it up. So.
That's right. Nelson's just googling.
That's actually why I couldn't finish the movie. I had to. I paused for too long at the Secret Wedding. No, so visible crew and equipment during the full attack at the start of the Battle of Stirling. Wallace repeatedly shouts "Hold," and in the wide shot, right before Wallace finally shouts "Now," as the horses gallop towards the right side of the screen, you can see a white car at the left side of the screen.
Are you serious?
Mhm. In a major fight scene, two soldiers on opposite sides are jumping and spinning and tapping each other on the heads with their swords, and that's what I was giggling about. It's just like they're just goofing off. They didn't know cameras were rolling or
Because
something.
those days filming are
Yeah.
like they're
Yeah.
horribly long.
Yeah.
So
And all that for like a literally a second shot
Yeah.
that's in that montage.
And I know that there's a watch on
car
somebody's
in
wrist
there?
that's exposed. Somebody's wearing Nikes. Like there's like little things like that like on a high budget film like this they take super seriously.
Yeah.
But I understand how these mistakes slip in, but also with the budget of this film, like
they shouldn't have.
slipped in.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
I did. I mean, so Mel Gibson, if you're listening, I didn't see any of them. I didn't catch any of those mistakes.
Yeah.
So there's two things that I'm still thinking here. Like one, I didn't hear. Did you think the movie held up?
So I think the movie holds up great.
Yeah.
It's a little rough at 2x speed.
Oh yeah, that's the question. Yeah.
No, I think some of the reaction shots where like it's two people looking at each other across the room in modern cinema, that would have been greatly reduced.
Oh yeah.
And that might actually have been where the whole extra hour was on the cutting room floor. It's just people looking at each other. But I think otherwise it really holds up. It's the ways that it's dated, I don't think hurt it that much.
No, I agree. What was the second question?
Well, the second question is I think there's a few more things that we missed for what's historically accurate in that. But because there's one thing I want to talk about too, like the prima nocta thing is like a bunch of BS.
Oh yeah,
but that literally like holds on to that literally hinges part of the whole movie.
The beginning that where
the you can go
England takes
sleep
right
with,
at first
yeah,
night.
that didn't happen.
So there's dispute among the historians whether or not that's ever happened in any culture anywhere. It's only ever documented as the other guys do this, but we don't have any hard evidence
on the other guys.
The other guys ever saying this is what we do, and you'd think that if they had it as a right, that would be documented somewhere. So there's no strong
which is
evidence
hard
of it.
because like that's kind of a crucial hinging point of the movie.
Literally everything falls on.
Well, and then there's a second one, which is when he does return home and they're doing Highland game type sport, and his childhood friend says that the English outlawed them from training with weapons. No evidence of that ever happening.
Okay.
And then the third one is when I guess it's actually early in the movie. So the first one, when his father is being buried, they're standing and watching men play
dead.
pipes.
He's actually a zombie.
Oh no, that's a different movie.
We're getting into the post-apocalyptic
and
movies
his uncle says they're playing.
They're playing the forbidden like,
playing outlawed tunes on
yes.
outlawed pipes. England did outlaw bagpipes at one
Thank
point
goodness.
in Scottish history to try and suppress the Scottish culture. It wasn't during Wallace's day, and also it wasn't effective. And it's been attempted
also,
other times as well. And
his father wasn't technically dead. Like it was said that he.
It's just an actor, yeah.
Well, no.
Like so, there's not confirmation that he died.
But it actually said that there's potential that he fought many battles with Wallace.
Oh, wow.
And then he died somewhere in there somewhere. But
now, if historical accuracy in stories is important to you, check out
documentaries.
I checked. No, there's a really great one. It's on
The
Netflix.
Da Vinci Code.
And I just forgot the name of it.
While you're thinking about that, I'll tell you what my bias was about this whole thing is. I watched it through this time, and I felt like it didn't hold up as well as I liked it to. And I say that because of these things that I was starting to find. And what I think the movie did, we can get into a greater conversation about this, but I don't really have answers for it, is it influenced a culture to take historical fact from a movie that's not historically factual.
Right.
And start utilizing that to shape almost like an evangelical pool to being like, hey, we're,
Are you talking about the Scottish independence movement?
No, I'm talking about the movie as a whole.
Oh, okay.
The movie, not
gotcha.
back in like
not its cultural
not William
effects
Wallace,
since then.
like what's happening in 1996.
Okay.
The world of 1996. Because in the world of 1996, you've got like this insurgence of new Christian music that's starting to pump into the area. You've got all these evangelical mega churches that are starting to really take their ground and like starting to really root themselves. You have all these books that are coming out. You have all these like this culture of Christianity that's like looking for something to attach to, but attached to something that's like, well, we don't want to be drinking. We don't want to be doing the smoking. We don't want to be doing all the sinners things, whatever, but we need something to attach to. And I remember this movie so specifically well because it was like one of the movies that I remember youth groups would even allow to be watched at, or you could watch it at a youth group.
Was it like the TV edit version or like the theatrical release?
The theatrical version.
Oy.
And
so
youth
like
groups were these.
like
And how do I get in?
I just remember it being like a big controversy because I remember my mom was like, well, you can't go to that youth group because they let them watch whatever. But at the same time, here's the thing. Like the standards are starting to become like, hey, this is a Christian movie. This is becoming factual that you need to have this man who is, it's almost like for the time when William Wallace was around, that was just like what culture was. I mean, men were over everything. Women didn't have rights, anything like that.
In 1995?
No. Sorry. When William Wallace, the actual,
the 80s,
the actual person of William Wallace, those things were fact. But the way that the culture was taking it in 1996 was, oh, we need to fight for our rights. We need to dig our heels into the ground. We need to fight for, wild at heart.
Yeah.
You got to fight. You have to fight for something. You have to fight for the golden-haired beauty or whatever. Be like Braveheart kind of idea.
Yeah.
And I was influenced heavy by
John Eldridge does reference that movie a lot.
Yeah, John Eldridge loves Braveheart and Gladiator and all those
The
epic,
Patriot.
the
Band
character
of Brothers.
epics. Yeah.
And so I guess when I watched it this time through, I just saw a lot of those holes for me in the way that my worldview was shaped through that movie. And so it didn't hold up as well. Still, the fight scenes are great. I love this and I love the music. It just, there was things in it that I'm just like, you're teaching me a poor way to relate to the world as a man.
I think
it was,
no. Go ahead, Jeff.
I feel like because I kind of group in that same area. For me, it wasn't
we're all
necessarily
the same age.
Right, it wasn't this like using movies to portray biblical or theological elements to like students and youth. I got that all the time and stuff. And for me, I feel like it's just that I feel like it was an easy way out. Like, oh, there's one theme in this movie that is biblical, or like it has an analogy that we can relate to and we can use to point to scripture. And it was easier to show a movie, show a clip, read a quote than it was to open up the scripture. And I was like, visually, movies, clips, like quotes are more stunning to youth than opening up the scripture. It's like I get why it was just it's easier for them to go, wait a second, this is kind of the idea I'm leaning towards scripture wise. So how can I represent it? This movie's great. Let's talk about the movie. It's like I absolutely agree. There was a lot of that. I think that's done a lot today.
Yeah,
too.
I get it. Like if I was going to form a message, a compelling message, I'd want to use the best visual or whatever I could to help illustrate my point. Get it. The things that like were kind of hard for me this time around, and the first times I noticed them was they portray Edward as kind of like this almost atheistic, nihilistic viewpoint that he doesn't care about people. He doesn't care about church or God, for that matter. He's about raping people. He's a very bad guy. But when you look at Edward documented, he's a Christian. He's a king. Yes, he probably did. He probably did some shady things.
He was a Christian by the standard of he claimed to be a Christian. And by that same standard, Hitler was a Christian, right? So we have to take people's own declaration of faith with a bit of a grain of salt. But I agree with you.
And I'm not even going to get because I don't know the man.
Sure.
Nor will I. I don't know if I'll ever know him.
Right.
But he is portrayed in this movie as like this horrible kind of
almost cartoonish villain.
Yeah. But Braveheart's portrayed as a man of God who is seeking after what is right and just.
I don't know that I would say that that's true. I know that that's what Christian culture often looks at him as. I don't see any declarations of faith from William Wallace in this movie.
He's definitely not motivated by faith.
It's not that he's motivated by faith, but that's what happened in 1996.
Right.
As we attached to the man as this is the Christian man.
Absolutely. Jumping a little bit back in the conversation, if you really want to watch a series that really nails historical accuracy at not this time, it would actually be several hundred years earlier, The Last Kingdom. You can watch it through Netflix, I believe. It's based off of Bernard Cornwell's books, The Saxon Stories, and it's excellent.
Is it William Wallace? Like, is he in the story?
No.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with. So this is post William Wallace?
Way before.
Way before.
Way before.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
This is not my expertise of history.
Yeah.
So, okay.
To give you how far before, William Wallace is like 1700s, which is also basically.
According to the movie, it was 1200s for William Wallace.
Oh, okay. I beg your pardon. 1200s. Yeah. This takes place in like the year 866 is when it starts.
Okay.
So it's way before. It's Vikings and stuff.
Ooh.
Strongly recommend it. Do we have any questions before we start getting into the content of the film itself? Phil?
We haven't been in the content of it.
Well, no, I think
starting now we're going to talk about the movie.
No.
We have talked largely about like the cultural response to the film, and I think that's super important and relevant, especially with American Christian culture. There was a strong cultural response to this that lasted for 20 some years.
Well, and I would say it's still in effect even today.
Yeah.
Because I think that generation now is taking over what we're seeing as the evangelical and Protestant church. Mm-hmm. And that is still like kind of the strongest.
Just died, so it's a whole new generation.
Yeah, it's a whole new generation. So what was your questions about like what?
Oh yeah, like jumping into biases that the movie holds, things that the movie projects to be true, and how we feel about them. I've got a bunch of quotes here from the movie, and Jeff, let's go through yours first. Do you have?
Okay, in this order, I had 1280 AD Scotland. So there's that note.
That's a quote.
That was the beginning of the movie. That was No, it was a title card.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? Do you think that holds true for you?
Well, if you rearrange the numbers in a different...
those Nike kicks, man. They were like a little off.
Yeah.
That van seemed out of place.
Yeah. So the first thing I wrote down...
More like 1980.
Easy, guys. Easy. This is a family show.
It's all good.
The first thing I wrote down, and we can either discuss it or move right past it, but it was William Wallace's dad to William Wallace, youthful at this age, depicted in the movie at least, youthful. I know you can fight, but it's our wits that make us men.
Yeah.
So
there's two interpretations for that line.
Yeah. So I had to look up what wits meant.
And then men.
Yeah.
That's a hot topic right now. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody can define man. It's woman that we struggle with.
So and my thoughts about this, which we've already kind of talked about a little bit, is just this idea like it's a little counterintuitive to some of the type of hypermasculinity movies that come out. Like William Wallace's father, and you kind of see William Wallace, like he's not afraid to fight for what he believes in, but he's asked multiple times in this movie as an adult, all I want is to grow old, have kids, and farm. So like even he knows like it's not about fighting, it's not about ruling, it's not about brutality. And it's like I think there is this beautiful juxtaposition of just like there is violence in this movie. There was violence in his story of real life, but like that's not what the fight was about for William Wallace, depicted in the movie. Like he was fighting for his freedom to procreate, to live a life that like
to self-govern.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I just, the first thing that struck me was this idea of like, for a movie that's very much a movie, the message that William Wallace is living out throughout the movie is very much, it's not about the violence. It's not about how you dominate. It's just about what's worth dominating for. And that really struck me. And I thought that was a theme that was played out through the whole movie.
There's a comedian I recently that I like a lot, and he when his daughter was born a few years ago. No, sorry, he has a son first, right? And his son's born, and he holding his baby son. He's like, I would die for this.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're going.
And then later he has a daughter, and he's like, I would kill for her.
Yeah.
and it's just interesting how like that hits you different, you know.
Yep.
And so William Wallace, like he, as portrayed in this movie, in order to win the heart of his wife, he knows that he needs to put away this kind of bravado, and he's okay with that. He is down.
He didn't come back home to start a revolution.
No, he came back home to settle
Claim
down,
his land,
to farm, and they brought the war to him.
Right.
And I know throughout the movie, like there's lines that hint at like he feels responsible for his wife's death, but if you take him out of the story, she still dies. Right? Because she was killed for fighting back against a rapist English soldier.
Right. Bit the cheek right off.
Mm-hmm.
The top cheek, not the bottom cheek.
And then
for clarification,
last episode, or actually several episodes ago now, I guess, when we did the Kubrick anti-war movie.
Oh, Paths of Glory.
Paths of Glory.
Paths of Glory.
You asked me, and I was honestly surprised by the question. You said, Nelson, are you anti-war? I was like,
it was a devil's advocate question.
Okay, I couldn't tell. I couldn't read your face. I thought you were asking sincerely. I was like, Jeff, have we never discussed war before?
No,
I said that I only thought that there was one legitimate purpose for war, and that was
money.
Yeah, that's right. To pad the wallets of Halliburton. No, it's independence, right? Yeah. The American Revolutionary War, I think it was a legitimate war. What we see here is William Wallace getting put over the edge of what he's willing to tolerate in tyranny.
Right.
And he snaps. And he snaps a couple times.
And just wondering, sorry, I'm going to
You're allowed to
pause
on
this here
podcast.
For a moment.
You're good.
So with that train of thought, Nelson, what do you feel about like the Twin Towers and that war?
Lord of the Rings.
To quote the great Ron Paul, they don't come over here because we wear blue jeans. They're over here because we're over there. The tragedy that was 9/11 was a provoked event from our decades of meddling in Middle Eastern politics, and we knew there's ample evidence that we knew that this event might happen and did not act to prevent it. It is my suspicion, and this is purely conjecture conspiratorial, that it was similar to Paths of Glory, this was an allowable tragedy to allow for a war. So, and we know Pearl Harbor was that.
So, boil this down for me, very simple terms. Yes, justified, no.
No.
Okay. That's all.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree with what you're saying.
Were the deaths of people in the Twin Towers not tragic? No, it's not what I'm saying. Absolutely tragic. But we provoked it, and the repercussions that we paid them were not in kind. In fact, often not metered out on the people even responsible for it.
Okay, sorry.
No. I appreciate the questions. So yeah, I think that this is a really good example of a just war until, after retaking Scotland, he invades York. At that point, he is now the tyrant. In my opinion.
Let me think about that for a second, because he hadn't achieved his. I don't think he had full independence then. So like I don't know if he was the tyrant yet, because like he still hasn't reached what he was fighting for. So like he still had justifiable reasons. He was still fighting for freedom at that point. He didn't have freedom.
Yes, but that does not require. Freedom does not require tyranny.
Right, but you said you said freedom is from your perspective, you said freedom is the only reason for war.
And so he would say that once you reach the end of your country,
but
you're good to go.
but
Once
he,
you reach the end of what you recognize
Right,
to
but
be
he-
your land.
but he said, but they still didn't have freedom though. England still had control because
Well, but he was
England
in
could
control.
But
rebuild
England
and
had
come
no,
back in.
But England had no armies, no standing armies there.
Yet.
No troops there.
That doesn't
yet,
mean they wouldn't
right?
come back.
And I recognize that William Wallace's exact quote was, "You won't unify, and because of that, they'll come
Right.
back."
If you don't get the weeds out of the ground, the weeds will come back up even if you
But
can't see them
let-
under the
let-
ground.
But hold on.
Gotta
So,
drain that swamp.
so, so William Wallace says to the other lords, "Because you won't come together, they'll come back."
Right.
Right. What part of that means? And so I must invade England.
What other option though did he have though? He literally
To-
it was in a room.
The other option he had was to not get up and leave the room. At this point,
You think he was going to bring that room together?
narrative wise,
Without getting them
no,
to show
because
their
that
butts?
doesn't make for an interesting movie.
Okay, but
But
if this was
we-
factual, if this event, if this
it was-
specific thing
if
was
this
factual,
was factual,
would you have just walked away and been okay? I tried. I'm done.
no,
Okay,
you continue to defend.
right, which is what he did.
No, he
No, he
then
invaded.
invaded. That's the opposite
He-
of defense.
I don't know.
Okay, let me ask you. Do you think the invasions of Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, as a result of the attacks on World Trade Towers, were legitimate?
I don't know. I don't know much about those to have a formulated opinion. If I'm not trying to take the easy answer out, like I don't know much about that.
Okay.
I know more about what happened on September 11th than I do everything after, everything before. I don't
Okay.
actually know much about the war on Iraq.
All right. Well,
so,
then let's
so
make
I'm not trying to. But
let's make it a personal hypothetical.
for just the movie though. Let me
Yeah,
for just
go
the movie. And this may even turn into a sports analogy. Yeah, typical Jeff going to sports.
Badminton.
Let's
Yeah.
score some goals.
No, villain. We'll say if the villain is inevitably going to come back.
So Steph Curry
Okay,
is the villain in this
Is that
scenario.
is that a sports? That's
He's a sports
That is
guy.
a sports guy. Okay,
Yeah.
if the villain is inevitably going to come back,
For another
does
championship.
us
run.
as the defendant making the first move automatically make us now the tyrant just because we know like it's not in it is us being aggressive can still be a form of defense knowing that they are
So-
going to attack whether we make a step or not.
Okay.
Like-
So the people in the city of York.
Yes,
All right.
Not New
of-
York. York.
York.
Let's clarify.
Yorkshire.
There
We're
was
mixing our
Pudding.
metaphors here.
there was the king's nephew
Yes,
who was not oppressing Scotland. He was governing York.
Shire.
There were the
just making
soldiers
that up.
in York, and then there were the people that lived in the city of York.
You're saying York a lot.
When they sieged the city of York, they killed the nephew, cut his head off, sent it to the king.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Presumably killed a bunch of soldiers who were there to defend the city and the people in it.
Mhm.
And what do you think happened to the people that lived in the city? Do you think they stuck around while the Scots took over?
I would assume not.
Okay, so of the people in the city of York, which of them are responsible for what the king's doing in Scotland, a different country?
Say that again.
Of the people in the city of York,
Right,
that
the
William Wallace,
non-combatants,
all of them,
all of them. Okay,
the magistrate, the soldiers, the
Okay,
people,
the cooks, the
which
chefs,
of them
the nurses.
should be held responsible for the standing armies in Scotland, a country that they are not currently in?
Jeff stares longingly into
I
Nelson's
do.
eyes.
I do.
Not sure
I
who
look
his
right
answer
over
might
his head
be.
when I'm trying to think deeply.
He strokes his mustache.
I don't know. I don't know.
I would argue none of them.
Okay, maybe that's why I'm saying don't. Maybe I agree with you. But yeah, I don't know the answer. To
And
that.
so returning oppression for oppression, that's not justice. That's revenge. And scripture is very clear about who is responsible for revenge. Vengeance is mine is not the end of the sentence. It declares the Lord.
If I know someone, if I know someone's going to come at me,
Come at me, bro.
inevitable. If if I have hard evidence or
Okay.
it's with infallible,
Okay.
I know someone's going to come at me.
Okay.
But I would have the advantage if I go to them first.
Yeah.
You're strategically thinking.
Right. And that is in defense of my life.
All
That's not in me go I'm not saying every act of this is this scenario that I'm fleshing out here. Like I'm not justifying all acts of aggression, but just specifically for this movie, like you'd said that he became a tyrant at one point. Like I'm just trying to flesh this out. You're like, I still don't think
Okay. Well, let me
He was
ask
still
you.
in defense of his country, knowing that they were going to come back. They were going they would continue to rebuild and come back, rebuild and come back, rebuild and come back. Doesn't matter how many people he takes out on Ireland, as long as there's people over there that can still rebuild and come back, that was going to continue to happen, which meant more deaths on Ireland. If he goes to them, that means no deaths on Ireland, and he can eliminate the pest problem before it infiltrates the stump. You know?
That's called blowback or retaliatory violence.
Sure, those are big words, but I'm just saying, I think those are logical and tangible reasons for defending your country.
I'm not saying
and that doesn't make you a tyrant.
I'm not saying it's illogical.
It doesn't make you a tyrant.
I'm saying
though.
it's not moral.
Oh, well, all of this is not moral. I didn't know that was your question.
So if
it's not, none of it's moral, Nelson.
The tyranny of it is the immorality of it. Are you familiar with the movie Minority Report?
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
Never
Not in the top
seen it.
250.
I've never
so we're
seen
not going to have to cover it. But
Sex.
the
That's a good one. Fits into my realm of like sci-fi.
All right, great. Phil, give us the elevator.
I do
pitch
not
for
know the
Minority
synopsis
Report.
of this.
Minority Report is
How it should have
a
ended.
futuristic society, which is not too far off from our own. And in this futuristic society, we now have precogs. Precogs work together to determine a crime before it happens.
Okay.
Minority Report functions to arrest these people before that crime actually happens by using these precogs, which are these kind of like people that have been put into a cognitive state and they see dreams of what might potentially happen as someone's about to murder someone. And so then the Minority Report go out in their little like futuristic police cars and they go like into someone's house during a heated conversation that a precog has potentially seen someone murder someone. And then they arrest that person before they commit the murder, and then they're put into jail. Problem in the movie is that the precogs then just start to have differing viewpoints on what the murder was, and they start to realize that the precogs aren't actually maybe giving them the full scope of what that murder was. And so they're going off of evidence that's not fully fact.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Now,
you just described A Few Good Men.
I would
is a
argue,
different
which we've
Tom-
also not seen.
Thank you, Phil.
I would argue that even if the precogs were fully infallible,
Okay.
punishing people for crimes they've not yet committed is unjust. Okay.
Could you see it as punishing them for crimes they already like? He was going after England, not the people just farming. Like he wasn't going for the whole country of England. He was going for the politics of England. So like, could you see it as him punishing them for what they've already done, not for what they were about to do? So even that same mindset of like he's still getting retribution for what's been done because
Right,
they still haven't. Ireland still had not seen justice at that point.
In a sense, the people of York, through their taxes, have funded the oppression of the Scots.
Oh, you're going there.
Okay, so I'll
So it is the peasants' fault.
I will give
Kill
you.
'em all.
I will give you that the peasants have some responsibility in the sense that they funded it.
But if they don't tax, they get their head taken off. So
Exactly.
Right,
So they don't
So
have-
England needed to be. Thank you, William Wallace. Thank you.
No,
You're proving my point,
no,
Wilson.
no, Jeff, no,
You're falling right into my hands.
No.
It was a trap.
Just like in Minority Report, where punishing people for crimes that they've not yet committed, that they actually don't even, and it occurs in the movie that people don't even recognize that they're going to be committing these crimes because they're crimes of passion, for
I wanna see
example.
this movie
Yeah.
now.
It's good. So somebody's going to commit a crime of passion in 48 hours and they get arrested for it and they're not even aware of the situation they're being arrested for. And then you find out that the precogs don't actually have perfect knowledge. And similarly, William Wallace does not have perfect knowledge. He's got a really reasonable expectation of what might happen. And on that reasonable expectation of what might happen, he then oppresses the people of York. I don't think that that's justified.
Okay.
It's still tyranny.
I'll allow it. I disagree, but I'll allow it. Phil, what do you think?
I just never thought we were going to go there with
Oh.
this conversation, which is fine. I appreciated that. And I don't disagree with your thoughts on that too, because I think that what you're talking about is actually proving a little bit of like my distaste for it this time around.
Okay. Yeah.
Is saying that like what that instilled in the men and the people that are watching this is that like, let's get my revenge. Let's get what's due to me kind
Right.
of idea.
And I do have to say,
for
Nelson, that pushback was brought to you by your father. So, Timothy Hicks, that goes out to you, my man. Love you, buddy.
is he an avid listener?
I was talking to Tim. This is a little sidestep here. I was talking to Tim a while back, and he, avid listener. He's going to be a guest here soon. Great dude. No thanks to Nelson. Timothy Hicks, great dude.
In fact, it's the inverse.
The inverse.
Thanks to Tim, I'm an okay guy.
I agree with that. Tim came up to me. He's like, "You need to push back a little more on my son. I just stop being so agreeable." I'm like, "Well, I agree with what he says." So this was so Tim, that was for you, and it was real. It was not.
I appreciated that. There was a lot of tension in the room.
I loved it.
It was
felt
palpable.
I loved
felt
it.
good.
I loved it.
This was nice.
It was hard though because
Let's push back on each other more often.
Deal.
No, I disagree.
Oh shoot. No, I get what you're saying, Nelson. I do. It's a gray area.
Yeah.
In defending for the people you love and the thing that you're most passionate about in the life that you dream to have, we will make choices that could or could not be mistakes.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
I think
absolutely.
he was justifiable in everything he did, but in some aspects could be deemed a tyrant. I can see your points, but I don't think that's the only. Sorry, I'm using my hands
and I guarantee
like a televangelist.
Picking up on the
you're
mics.
going to hear this throughout all of Jeff because Jeff just taps so passionately when he's in a.
Sorry, I've had a very emotional day. And I'm fired up today.
I will give you that everything
He's ready
he did
to
was
go.
rational.
Yeah.
Everything he did was rational.
Yeah.
I don't think it's justifiable.
Okay.
I think those are
All
different things, but certainly
disagree.
rational, especially in the terms of war.
Okay.
Like,
Were there terms of war?
No, there wasn't terms of war.
There was not. There was not.
In the context, I should say, of war,
Because
it's a very rational thing to have retributive violence.
Yeah.
I don't think it's moral or justifiable, but it is rational.
Because we see in the movie, again, we're specifically focusing on the fictitious representation of this movie. We see in the movie multiple times in different scenarios. England says something and does something else. The manipulation of the soon-to-be queen or the dude's wife,
Isabella,
like with the manipulation of her and how they use and then the entrapment of William Wallace when he we see that all the time, like where they say, well, so there were definitely no one was following any guidelines of war in this movie
for sure. One of the first things you brought up, I know you can fight, but it's our wits that make us men. Shortly after that, his uncle says to him, "First learn to use this," and he points at his head. "Then I'll teach you to use this," and he points at his sword. And then again, shortly after, but it's a big time jump, he says to his friend how your head is more important in battle than your arm. It's really interesting that even though this is this is a war movie, this is an epic, what the movie repeatedly states but doesn't show is that your character is much more important than your ability to fight.
Yeah.
Now, it does show several weak men as far as character goes, right? All the other nobles. But that's more their heart than their head. So yeah, I thought that was interesting, that they set up early on, this is going to be a major theme.
A strategic
really
mental battle. It was
doesn't.
all physical.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
Now, when the father says, "I know you can fight, but it's your wits that make us men," there's two possible interpretations there. One, he's saying, your ability to fight is not what defines you as a man. And I think that's an important message.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, he then is saying, you're not allowed to come with us, which means you don't have wits. And
backhanded compliment.
You're young, dumb, and foolish. You shouldn't come along. I think that was really, really interesting. Jeff, do you have additional thoughts? Or
I'm gonna pass. I'm gonna pass.
Or Phil?
Yeah, so I've
tapped
got
out
one more
both?
closer to the end.
Okay.
So if we're going chronologically,
Phil?
I'm just enjoying hearing your guys' opinions on this, but I'll bring in my thoughts as they
we would love
come
to have your
along.
thoughts.
Okay.
I would say that for me, viewing this movie, the lines that stuck out to me as a young college student still were there and held the same kind of truth, just in a different light for me.
Absolutely, yeah.
Especially the war scene, the Sterling Bridge war scene without the bridge, where he talks about one day dying in your bed. Will you look back for just one more chance?
Yeah.
And I think there's so many times. What is it Michael Jordan that says? or is it Kobe? Says you got to shoot. You only take.
No, that's Michael Scott.
That's Michael Scott.
Larry
Yes,
Bird.
Quoting Wayne
Nice.
Gretzky.
Quoting Wayne Gretzky.
You miss 100% of the
Just
shots you don't take. Yeah.
But I think that there's something to be said in your own heart and your. I would agree that America culture sits with a very like laissez-faire attitude towards a lot of things, and allows themselves to slip into biases that are very polarizing, whether left or right. And so I think that is a call in the movie to just say like, no, do something with your life, do something more, fight for the thing that you care about. I unfortunately, I would say that most people do not fight for the thing that they actually truly care about. They fight for the thing that they're most politically aligned with. They fight for the thing that brings them the most comfort. They fight for the thing that's most
Or status.
Yes, that brings them the best status. And so I think that what William Wallace was saying, like, no, there's a different route. There's a different path. Come follow me, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. So I've got like the majority of his speech here, because he says to the lords and the noble lords, if this is your army, then why does it go? And then he turns to the men and says, I am William Wallace, and I see a whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men, and free men you are. What will you do with that freedom? Fight, and you may die. Run, and you will live, at least for a while. But when you're on your deathbed, you'll think back to this day and think, what I could have done. They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. That's an abridged version, because there was no bridge. That speech, I don't think would be enough to convince me to stay
100%.
and fight.
Also, they ain't got no microphone system up there.
Yeah.
Half of those people
Have you ever
are like,
seen
what the heck you say?
More than
Have
half
you
are
ever seen
like,
Life of Brian?
Oh, yeah.
more than half of them are probably like,
Something about the meek?
just wait, he'll tell us when to lift our skirts. That's what they're waiting on. They have no clue what he's saying. Yeah.
I think, while that's a beautiful speech, and I do think it's absolutely true that you need to be willing to fight, even to risk your own life for the things that you're truly passionate about. A big lesson from William Wallace's life, an example, is that until he was, and people are going to misunderstand me when I say this, but I'm going to use the term anyway, unchained and unburdened of the domestic life that he was working towards, he had too much to risk by fighting.
Yeah.
And I think too often we as men with wives and husbands and wives and families and houses,
You've covered all of them.
wives, families, houses, careers.
Non-binary.
We are loath to risk those
Significant
comforts
others.
for what we want to fight for. And I think that is a good thing to be reserved like that. Later on, Robert the Bruce says, these men have landed in castles, it's a lot to risk. And William Wallace says, and the common man that bleeds in the battle, does he risk less?
Mm-hmm. That was a great line.
Why don't presidents go to war? Why do they always send the poor, right?
System of a Down.
And so I think like these two things kind of tie together.
Let's let the bodies hit the floor.
That's Drowning Pool. Guys.
And so I think these two kind of conversations, and actually one thing this movie does really, really well is repeating and mirroring themes in different conversations through the film. But this is one that I think mirrors really well, is like, you've got these lords that are willing to negotiate, but the terms of the negotiation mean that these peasants and commoners continue to live in tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
And they're fed up enough to the point that they're willing to fight, so long as they know that they're not fighting to pad the wallet of the lord above them. Not the lord, but just the guy in the nice robe.
Sounds like a lot of anarchy right here.
Mm-hmm.
Man, don't get me started.
Well, I think you're already started. You're already down that path.
You said the A word.
But yeah, so I just thought that those conversations, the way they mirrored each other and reflected each other, were really interesting.
Agreed.
End of statement.
I'm going to push back.
I don't think it was.
I don't think so.
Tyranny.
There was no mirroring
like
happening
tyranny.
there.
I don't know about you, but oppression sounds nice right now. I need a new change of pace.
One character that I feel like doesn't get a lot of attention when people talk about this movie is Robert the Bruce's father, Robert the Bruce
The
Sr.
little conniving behind the scenes
yeah,
guy.
the old leper. So he says,
the old leper.
The old leper.
he says, that's
The
what I
old
call,
leper face.
that's what I call my
Died for
dad.
him too.
I'm gonna read a quote. I want to get your thoughts on it. Phil, we're gonna go to you first. Uncompromising men are easy to admire. He has courage, but so does a dog. It is exactly the ability to compromise that makes a man noble.
That is, I feel like I was on Jeopardy. What is?
Please answer in the form of a question.
I would agree with that, but I would agree in the sense of like noble men or people who have power compromise for the ability to not lose their power. So
you mean noble not in the colloquial sense, but in the literal sense of like somebody in aristocracy?
yes.
Okay.
I think that there's always a give and take once you've achieved that certain level to say like, how do I not fall out of this tree? Like, is there a way, like, even if I have to compromise on this, I'm still in this tree. I'm still seen as nobility. So I'm going to stay with that. Whereas like the common man or whatever, they have to climb up to get to that nobility. They have to figure out a way into the tree. And so I think that there's just always this kind of tension of, what was the first part of his statement? Read that again.
Yeah, uncompromising men are easy to admire. He has courage, but so does a dog.
Mm-hmm.
It is exactly the ability to compromise that makes a man noble.
Mm-hmm. And you look at the uncompromising man who says, I'm going to do this no matter what. I'm going to climb this tree. I'm going to get in nobility. Or what was the movie with Heath Ledger?
Cool
I'm going to
Runnings.
change my stars because he's a Thatcher. Knight's Tale.
Knight's Tale.
Was that what it was called?
Yeah, it is Knight's
Knight's
Tale.
Tale?
Yeah,
It's also The Greatest Showman, which isn't Heath Ledger, but very
No.
much the same.
I've never seen The Greatest Showman.
So
Zac
good.
Efron? Zendaya?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it either.
I can't recommend it enough.
Really?
It's so good.
Then don't.
But here's
Please stop.
Stop right now.
I don't necessarily love musicals. It's kind of one of those.
I love musicals.
Yeah.
Next to movie is a musical, Hamilton. It's
Oh.
coming back in a week.
Alexander Hamilton.
Oh, it's
So-
about Alexander. Okay.
The Great, that's right. So, Jeff, your thoughts. Uncompromising men are easy to admire. He has courage, but so does a dog. It is exactly the ability to compromise that makes a man noble.
My dog has no courage. Also, side note.
Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Can you read the last part of that quote again?
It is exactly the ability to compromise that makes a man noble.
I disagree with the last part. So I guess,
Just the last part?
well, so I agree with the first part.
Mhm.
I think I all the people that I try to admire or strive to be like are people that,
They're doing crazy crap.
yes,
They're
but
uncompromising.
they're uncompromising. Like they're true to who I believe they are.
Mhm.
And and I admire to be that, and I strive to be authentic in everything I do. Like I'm not different from behind the scenes versus what you see is what you get to. Like so, like I agree with the first part. The second part, like I don't think you have to compromise. Like, and William Wallace did not compromise.
Yeah.
Like even at the very end when he's getting executed and tortured, and they're like, just yell mercy. Yell mercy. Everyone can justify you yelling mercy. Do it. Just say it. No one's gonna wrong you for doing it. And he goes, freedom.
Yeah.
There's so much more. Even at that moment, even at that one line is fictitious. Whether
Yeah,
he
the
said
whole,
it,
the whole scene's fictitious.
right?
He was hung
They
instead.
they did split his body into multiple parts.
After
and
they
stuff.
hung him to death.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, but even if that it didn't happen, like the
Sorry.
The way the movie portrays it.
right. There's so much more power in what that represents than if he were to go mercy. Now, no one would have been like, I can't believe he said mercy. Like, I would have said mercy. I would have said mercy before they put the
But
first rope on me.
Is
Like,
that really a compromise at that point? Like, I mean, we're talking about death at that period. What I think that he's talking about.
I think if you don't do it, it's certainly uncompromising.
yes,
And so, almost just by the nature of the way language works, if you do it, it is compromising.
In layman's terms, it's like, again, no one would fault him for it.
Right,
Mhm.
right. And that's
For
different.
protecting his own, like, he's not putting anyone else in danger by saying mercy. Like he's now not endangered anyone by saving himself. But like it's like I agree with that personally.
I guess the way I look at that statement of what Nelson's talking about is it's a power statement. And what I see William Wallace in that last scene is that's not like necessarily compromise will not put him into more power. Like compromise will only allow him to have mercy and have kind of a sweet little send off or whatever. Whereas like he actually chooses the other path, which would have been the dog running around. And he's basically like, no, I want to continue to pursue this craziness.
Yeah.
Whereas,
he's also got nothing to lose. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. At this point, he's done at this point. So it's like, because what your statement is dealing with more is about like the nobility who are already in that
They're
form
already
of power,
compromised.
and they're already trying to figure out what
I
to
just
do.
realized that the reason that word is used the way it is, like a politician that's compromised, what we mean by that typically, and I've never considered it in that context, right? Is that they have
above Nelson's head.
He's denouncing everything he believes right here on air, live for all to hear.
A politician that's compromised is
he's turning a Republican
who owes something to
a Democrat
to political.
What are we about to see?
He's evolving.
I'm sitting on the edge of my seat.
No, if anything, I'm digging in more.
It's a Pikachu.
So actually, earlier today, I was having a conversation that made this line really stick out to me. Somebody asked me, is pragmatism antithetical to being principled?
Those are a lot of big words.
He's speaking in tongues right now, so let me translate for you.
So pragmatism is like when you're willing to compromise on things to move forward a political agenda. That's
practical.
Practical is another word for it.
Right.
Slightly different connotation, but very, very, very similar.
For layman's terms, for Jeff's terms.
And the question was, is it antithetical to being principled? Right? And my knee jerk on it was that I wanted to say it wasn't. But when I thought about it...
What does antithetical mean?
The two ideas are incompatible.
Oh.
What does incompatible mean?
Oil and vinegar.
Yeah. Like you can't have one...
Oil and water.
Much like love and marriage, you can't have one without the other. No, the opposite of that, I guess. So... The reason this line stuck out to me so much is because after thinking it through for a little bit...
translator for Nelson. And I think this podcast would take off if you had a translator for Nelson.
Well our goal is to have someone do a podcast about our podcast.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a breakdown of our episode.
I see.
Explaining my autism.
So if anyone's open to starting that series, hit us up, DM
I hope
us.
people don't interject on you as much as I'm doing right now. But go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Great.
You're fine. In order to be pragmatic, you are, by very definition... going to compromise on your core principles, right? Now, with aristocracy, it's going to look a whole lot different than it does in modern democratic politics.
Okay. You need to slow the down and help
I'm sorry.
half of the people who are listening understand the words that just came out of your mouth.
That's really fair.
Because I know I'm sitting here and I'm like, I think I understand.
That's really fair. I always just assume people are keeping up with what I'm saying. So
you're dropping a lot of big words. You're very academic right now. I love it. I'm actually kind of attracted to you right now.
Vibes up good.
But yeah, just
all right. So
think high school.
Yeah.
No, think third grade.
All right. I'm going to explain this as if I'm explaining it to my daughter. I think that's probably best.
So probably still over our heads, but it's fine.
Sophie's brilliant.
She's wicked smart. Okay. So if you're being practical when it comes to politics, you are going to have to make compromises and negotiate on the things that you claim to be your core principles, the things that are of most and highest value to you.
Okay. Yes.
Well done.
So you're going to take deals that you wouldn't take otherwise because you know it's going to further your political agenda. We see this explored in a lot of cinema in different ways. In this particular movie, the way it's explored is you've got one guy who's being constantly told he has to compromise to maintain his status as an aristocrat, as somebody in the nobility.
This is Robert the Bruce.
And then you have this other character who only gets more and more and more dug in on his principles. I would argue he does compromise on his principles in some way with retaliatory violence, but
for the user who doesn't understand what retaliatory is.
Oh, I thought you were going to
Oh,
define it.
I thought you were going to answer.
Yeah.
Like,
Repaying in kind for what you think is
Thank
an
you.
injustice. So like you strike me on the cheek, I'll strike you on the cheek.
Ooh, cheeks.
I do think William Wallace goes across the line there, as we already talked about.
Yes.
But this movie, like a lot of the movies we cover, they have a big staying power because it has to do with somebody in a search for identity. From the moment we see William Wallace as an adult, he knows who he is, and he doesn't change. The character who has a story arc in this is Robert the Bruce, who has got this back and forth tug of war of, am I going to be a man of principle or am I going to be pragmatic?
Mm-hmm.
And finally, at the very end, after William Wallace martyrs himself, he stands up for principle.
Which leads to the sequel, which was horrible.
There was a sequel to Braveheart?
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
There's a Braveheart too?
No, it's not called Braveheart 2. It's called it was horrible. I don't even think it made it it was really bad.
Any of the same creative company?
It was supposed to be based off of Robert the Bruce.
Oh, okay.
But I don't remember.
There was let me get the date
Was
here.
it
In
Braveheart?
2019, there was, according to IMDb, they refer it to a spin-off of Braveheart. And it's the same actor, Angus McFadden, who played Robert the Bruce in Braveheart.
Who has the gnarly goatee.
He plays Robert the Bruce in this movie, and this movie is called Robert the Bruce, King of Scots. I'm assuming none of us have seen this. But yeah, so it's not a sequel, but it is a spin-off with the same actor playing the same character. And there also, while we're saying this, it is worth noting, there is a movie that Netflix did in 2018 called Outlaw King, and it is also about Robert the Bruce.
Yes, and that's very good.
I have not watched that either. So there's two, and one is seemingly connected to Braveheart.
I also, in my research for this movie, I Googled Braveheart memes, and they
as all researchers do.
Yeah, I mean, it's very lackluster.
Dedicated guest.
When it comes to memes.
Yeah.
I was like, there's not really a Braveheart meme that I'm like, oh yeah, I really recognize that one. Other than maybe freedom or something, but that's not a meme.
Yeah. I mean, you need a good punchline for a meme to really take hold.
They're not really good memes.
I've got one last quote from the movie to discuss before we get into wrap up, unless you guys have things that you want to go over.
I've also got a quote too, if it's not the same one you have.
Go ahead.
It'd be something we can gloss over.
No, let's do yours.
It could be the same one. So I don't have it word for word, but it's closer to the end of the movie. I actually don't know the new team. I don't know the two people's names.
It's not the King James version, though.
But it's the sheep, mere sheep, easily dispersed if we strike the shepherd.
Oh, that's what the
so it's the
Edwards.
That's the King Long.
Talking about like
when they were rising.
Forget
up
about
and
the
stuff
army
like that.
now.
Mm-hmm.
If we take out the shepherd, we've got him.
Yeah.
That was just a striking line, and that's something that's
Hail Hydra, cut off the head and two more.
Really, well, not from that perspective. He didn't say anything about the heads coming up, but I just thought that was a very striking line and a very militaristic a perspective of a military strategy.
I don't
It's also
think
kind of a
that's
stupid perspective.
I don't think it's accurate.
It's not
Because it's
accurate at all.
if-
That could even fire them up even more.
if you reversed
You'll martyr
it
them.
and it was you killed him, there's another tyrant that's going to rise up in his place. So it's
Right.
it doesn't matter.
That was the last thing I had.
All right, I've got one last one. William Wallace says to the gathered lords after the Battle of Stirling, "You're so concerned with squabbling for the scraps from Longshank's table that you've missed your God-given right to something better. There's a difference between us. You think the people of this land exist to provide you with position. I think your position exists to provide these people with freedom, and I go to make sure that they have it." This is right before he commits an act of tyranny. But what do you think of that speech?
I'll go first, and I'll throw it to Phil. I think that line there proves that William Wallace would have been in your camp, Nelson, of libertarian.
He thinks that there's a
anarchist.
legitimate use for governance.
No. That for the act of freedom
Yeah.
for every single individual.
Sure, I'll give you that.
So government for freedom, not government for control.
Yeah.
So just going from on that specific
Yeah.
line, that you could sway to the fact that he's wanting everyone to have their own ability to do what they want in a free, respectful way.
Right. I would,
government just providing the ability for freedom.
yeah, I would give you that if there is a legitimate use for politicians and,
Right.
and nobility, etc., that is it.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in what your little like squirreled away thought is for why you chose that, because I feel like you have this like thought out. Hey, I want to tell you about some sort of libertarian thing of why this.
No, I've already said my thoughts on this, which is if there is a legitimate use and purpose for politicians for monopolized governance, that's it, to secure and maintain liberty.
Mhm.
However, in every single circumstance where we've attempted that, it's always become people that compromise to secure their own status, which is what William Wallace is fighting against, but doesn't realize that the thing that he's fighting against is right there in the room with him.
Mhm.
Because he thinks they're on his side, and they're not. They're on their own sides.
Yeah. And I would say, in my opinion of all that stuff or whatever, especially that quote, I think that we fight frugality a lot, and we don't dream as big as we possibly could dream. And I think what he's even saying to people who have wealth, who have nobility, who theoretically would have, like in our modern world,
government power,
government
power,
or celebrity status, or like wealth and money or whatever.
Yeah,
like what he's saying to them is like, you're still being frugal because there's bigger dreams that can be given, and those bigger dreams are through generosity.
You're thinking inside the box.
Basically, like this world offers so much more.
Yeah,
and freedom is like really the start of that world.
Phil, I like what you said, because like I kind of take it to when scripturally, when the people were wanting a king, and God's like, you don't need a king. You know, oh, you've got a king, like you've got the all knowing, like the king,
the king of kings,
right? And essentially, the people they're thinking they've boxed their idea of what they think leadership is, versus what God's going like, no, I've got something better for you, but if you want it, you're not going to like it. It's inevitably going to be your downfall. Like, so I feel like it's the same thing. Like they're thinking within this construct of what this type of structure that they've either become familiar with or they think is the definitive idea, but they can't get their heads to wrap around this idea of like, no, freedom, like real freedom.
Well, and I would even say that freedom is a hard thing for people to understand and taste, especially if you've lived in bondage for so long, like that you don't even know what true freedom feels like, and true freedom is going to offer you as you live your life. And for most people, especially in this movie, when we're talking about this movie, like there was a lot of oppression from like the villagers to servants to whoever else is like this. There's this huge oppression, and I think that there's not a clear definitive idea of what is freedom in this movie, other than it's a concept that we want to go after.
Right. I think the closest they get to freedom or liberty as a concept in this movie is the right for Scotland to rule itself. But as established even within the movie, the lords of Scotland cannot come to any kind of agreement on who should rule Scotland.
Yeah.
Wrap up questions?
And on that note.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Or does anybody have any final thoughts before wrap up questions?
About the movie or just about life in general?
Yeah, life in general.
No, I've got something about
the Trump indictment.
Oh gosh, that's another movie. No, I think I'm ready for wrap up. You guys are good.
Yeah, okay, and some of these wrap up questions we can actually probably skip. We covered them early on. Maybe we just touch them real quick.
Yeah, we'll gloss over and we'll get
fill them up real quick.
Or feel them up. All right. So
I don't like that.
Would you guys change the rating of this movie?
No.
It's rated R currently.
I think it would work. I think it would work as a PG-13 movie.
They could edit it down
just fine.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be R.
Made for TV version. Yeah. I had two notes just within this wrap up. I just want to say the comic relief in this movie, because there were moments, the butts, like things that were done, like that you chuckled at as you're watching this as a viewer.
Like the bolting out of his.
Yeah. Like some of the lines that were stayed that were more like I liked the dialogue in some of these movies that were meant for like, oh wait, like that were kind of like out of this like.
Yeah, my favorite thing is when the Irishman is like, he looks at William Wallace and he's like, I've been talking to the God today, and he assured me I'm okay, but he doesn't know about you.
Yeah, I guess that is. There's two F words because he's just.
He's like, that's what I was like. I didn't want to say. I'm like, I think that's what he said.
Yeah.
Yeah, quack it out.
So I did I do think it should be rated R still, but like I thought the comic relief was really nice. I thought
Yeah.
it was well done. I think this movie was well written.
Yeah.
The storyline, it was not choppy. It flowed great. What in my other note here was getting into the next question, and I'll give my thought first. Then, would you recommend this film? Absolutely, I would recommend it. I think it's a great movie.
I think so.
If you're looking at it for historical accuracy or for spiritual formation,
No.
get out of here.
No.
Like that's not what this is for. But if you want to be entertained, or if you want something to inspire you, to kind of like to rev you up, if like this is a good movie to watch before you go work out.
There's
like
one of the great,
yeah,
I think, stories or messages of this movie is what a man can be driven to.
What a man.
But there's other movies that also do that, and I think some better ways. I don't
Waterboy.
I don't think you watch this
Specifically.
movie for any of the lessons from the movie, but I think it's a great movie worth watching.
Yeah. Phil?
I would say if I was going to recommend it to someone, I'm like, if you don't know William Wallace's story, it's a nice like taste into it, but it's not historically
History
accurate.
adjacent.
And it's one of those things that'll make you feel like, oh, that's kind of what it was like.
Yeah.
One actually, this is a real fun fact. I think it goes with what we're talking about here. Wallace, this is from IMDb. Wallace's two trusted captains throughout the film were Hamish, who is Scottish, and Stephen, who is Irish. Hamish was played by an Irish actor, and Stephen was played by a Scottish actor. So they swapped the actors'
That's so
genetics
silly.
for the characters' genetics. Yeah. All right. So last, has it aged well? I think yes.
I think so.
Ooh,
I
controversy.
think I've already answered this in a sense. Like, I think that it aged poorly through the release date to about like 2010.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Because I think it influenced our culture in a negative light.
Specifically Christian culture.
Christian culture,
Yeah.
yes.
I agree with that.
I would say now looking at it, I think we've moved past that in our like kind of our Christian viewpoints and things like that.
Yeah.
So like if I was to look at it now, I'd be like, okay, it's fine. Like, cause I think that there's enough dialogue and conversation around what it means to be a man now in church. Even though we're fighting culture wars with that, I think that that's kind of awakened the church to talk a little bit more about manhood and what that should be and what that should look like, and actually giving a little bit more context of like, you can have the intimate moments, but also fight for something. And I think that those conversations are now coming from the church itself, opposed to like some sort of outside force.
Instead of trying to make Braveheart biblical, we're
Make the Bible Braveheart.
no, we're looking at the Bible for our examples of masculinity.
Yeah.
Right.
And trying to exegete instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say that I'm not fearful of it in any way influencing the culture now, but I think back then so my answer is like a kind of aged well. Like,
You've seen it affect culture negatively, and you can see how it can entertainment wise be positive. So you kind of view it dualistic there. All right, last question. This is the most specific question of the whole night. Would this be in your personal top 250? If you had to rank your favorite top 250 movies, name them right now, Phil.
Narrow that down from 250.
Can you name 250 movies right now?
I would say it probably would sit somewhere in the 250, but it would probably be pretty low.
Okay.
I think that there is a lot of other movies that I would recommend or kind of allow there to be a better. I think there's a better voice in a lot of different movies that I would put before that.
Okay.
Now, music wise, this would be like at the top of my list.
Well, I
like,
wouldn't say
I mean,
top.
not top, but it would definitely be like more towards the top of the 100 than the bottom. So it's different. It's like cinematically wise, like we've moved so far cinematically forward in movies that I'm just like, man, this is kind of sinking down. And then also with the fact of like how like what I just talked about with like the culture effect of it, it's kind of moved down on my list, but like it still sits high on that music value and good story for the most part.
Yeah.
So I'd still say it's in.
I would say this would probably be my top 250. And I'm really glad. Like, I went into this movie thinking that I knew everything about the movie. Like, okay, I know, I'm familiar with it. I'm really glad that there was parts of it that I was either didn't finish, or just completely forgot. And this movie felt new to me, and I really enjoyed it. It had me from the very beginning. As specifically entertainment, I love this movie. It was sad. It was emotional. It's not an easy watch. This is not a lighthearted movie, but I really enjoyed it. I would say, as it stands, this would make the top 250
lighthearted
movies.
movie. It's not a comedy.
It's a Braveheart.
It's not like The Notebook.
It's a Bravehearted movie.
Jeff.
It's no Notebook, but it'll do.
Yeah, it's a Bravehearted movie. Yeah, no.
Which also, random side fact.
We allow
reading about this. Braveheart was the name of Robert the Bruce, not William Wallace.
Really?
So
But
that
also,
kind of puts a little
he's
twist
the
on the whole thing.
narrator.
Yeah.
He's the guy doing the introduction.
Robert
he's
the Bruce's.
Yeah, he's reading.
Yeah,
he's talking at the
fascinating.
beginning. He's talking at the end,
I don't think I picked
and
up
he's
that
the one
was
with the
not-
character arc. This movie
Is about Braveheart.
is about William Wallace, but William Wallace is the main character, but it's about Robert the Bruce.
Mhm.
That's cool. That's cool.
And we leave you with that.
Yeah. Mic drop. But we're not actually, because these are nice mics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we pray or something?
Yeah.
And now we close in prayer. Phil?
we hold hands.
Do you have any last questions? I don't believe I answered
I can
your
come
last-
up with another
I don't
one.
believe I answered
Oh, no,
your
you
last
didn't.
question.
Would this be in your top 250?
Yeah.
No.
No. Wait, hold on. Let me ask you again. Nelson, would this be in your top 250?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
There you go.
No, I don't think it would be.
Okay.
I've been pretty picky with our top 250, and I've not.
I love
paying
that.
A lot of
That's
attention
allowed.
to what I actually keep in my top 250.
Yeah.
Recommending a movie to me does not equate me loving a movie. Like, if I go another 10, 15 years without seeing this, I'll be fine. Like, it won't bother me at all.
Okay.
And kind of the way I track up my top 250 is like, how soon would I want to see this again?
Okay.
Right? Like,
Your top 250 is based on watchability.
And I would say that my basis is
Rewatch,
if I could come back to this movie 10 years from now, would it still be enjoyable?
mm,
So because I think that there's so many movies that I loved that now I go back and watch and I'm like, well, that didn't hold up well.
yeah, like
that was
Master of Disguise, which I used to watch probably at least once a week, and I watched it recently with the kids. It's not good. I can quote it beginning to end. Doesn't make it good.
Dude, watched The Never-Ending Story the other day.
Oh, that's
I was
bad.
like,
That movie
I've
sucks.
what the heck?
It
I've never
sucks.
seen that.
And like
I've
then
never
the
seen that.
Jerk, my all-time favorite movie. I watch it at least once a year. Right? It's not going to win any awards.
Well, it's out of that season.
That's true. It's just
Yeah.
a little old for that.
Yeah.
But I watch it at least once a year. Like that, like easy decision for me. Top
Mm-hmm.
250. So this, I don't think I put in my top 250. I think it's a great movie, but I think that what the movie does well, there's other movies that do it better.
Nelson, I'd like to challenge you here on air in front of our listeners
In front of my father.
to start ranking our episodes that we do and start coming and start making your own
We're
list.
only 20 some in. I can
Well,
go
let's
back
start
and
with
do
this
that.
one. Where does this rank?
In the 20 movies so far,
Yeah.
shooting from the hip, not remembering exactly
Pew
what's in
pew
there.
pew pew pew.
It's in the top 10.
Okay.
Well, that's
Mine's
not that
mine's
high.
number 5.
That's like 50-50, man.
Yeah.
That's like a
It's a
coin.
safe answer.
Mine's in the top 5 right now.
It's in the top 5?
They made the top 5.
Oh, wow.
It bookends the 3 Star Wars movies and Lion King. Well,
Okay.
Lion King's at the top. Star Wars.
Lion
Braveheart.
King?
Lion King's at the top.
And then
You got Hans
so
Zimmer.
Into the Wild
you got
is now
Jonathan
6.
Taylor
Yeah,
Thomas.
I mean, I love The Lion
So
King,
cute.
but I'm like,
Yeah.
Into the Wild is 6 now?
Into the Wild 1-6. Yeah.
Breaks my heart. Let's wrap there. Next week, join us. It'll be Jeff and I again.
Yes.
flying-
Weekly.
And
Yes.
we'll be doing the movie Hamilton
Yes.
just in time for 4th
will
of
you guys
July.
be singing?
Though
I can't promise that I won't.
I can't help myself. I can.
Will there
almost
be
guarantee-
audio clips? I feel like you need some audio clips with that.
I,
You're hired. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for listening. We had a great time putting this together for you.
To join the conversation, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Silver Screen Biases.
And on Twitter at Screen Biases.
We believe in value for value, so if you found value in our show, we ask you to consider supporting us.
Links to our social media and support can be found in the show notes.